In this episode, we are going to finish up the HTML, CSS, and then add the animations for JavaScript. There's a lot we need to cover in a short amount of time, so let's go ahead and start with the HTML. We are creating a section that has the banner class, and we also want to give it an ID of banner. Inside the banner, we are going to create a div that has the banner BG, and then underneath that, we're creating another div for banner-BG. Now outside of the banner BG, we are going to create a container with the row class. And inside of that, we are going to create a class with the banner inner. And then we want to create an ID with the banner. And every time we create IDs, we are using camel case. So it's going to be banner with no space and then inner. Inside of that, we are having a content class and a content inner within that. Now inside the content inner, here's where we're going to house the content or the left side of the banner. And in here, we are having an h1. And inside this h1, we are having a div with a line class. And inside the line class, we're having a span tag that will say helping students pay. We're going to go ahead and copy and paste this line. And we're just going to write off their ridiculous death. That's going to do it for our h1. Now outside of the h1, we're going to create a p tag and then just add some lorem ipsum text. Now as a sibling to the p tag, we're creating a div with the button row class. And inside that button row class, we're having an a tag that will just go to the home directory and it will say apply today. Now as a sibling to the button row, we want to create a div with the play video class. And inside the play video, we are going to create a div that will have play video. And it's going to take in another class, so we're going to do cover. So it's going to have play video and the cover class name. There isn't going to be anything inside this play video cover class, but inside the play video, the parent, we are going to have a span tag. And the span tag is going to take in an image, and this image is going to access the images folder. And we're finding the play SVG, so it's going to display the play button. And then as an alt attribute, we can just say play icon. Now next to the image, but still in the span tag, we're just going to write watch video. Save that, and that's going to do it for the content inner. Now nothing is going to go inside here, but outside the content inner, as a sibling of it, we're going to create a div with the class name of image. And inside that, we're going to create a div with the class name of image inner. And inside of that, we are using an image, and we are accessing the images folder, and we're displaying the hand webp. And as an alt attribute, what we could add in here is just hand. Now the WebP format is the latest and greatest format by Google. Not all browsers support it, so you could definitely create a fallback, but we're not going to production, so we don't need to create a fallback because we are using Google Chrome as our primary browser. Next, we want to create a div that has the class name of feature banner. And we want to give the feature banner an ID of feature banner, but it's going to be camel cased. And inside the feature banner, we are going to write 0% interest. Now we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to copy and paste the feature banner. The only thing we're changing is the ID and the class name. So we're adding a class name of green as well as a feature banner. And the ID is going to say feature banner green, but it's going to be camel cased. So any IDs, like I mentioned before, are camel cased and class names have a dash in them. The content for the div here, it's not going to be 0 interest. We're going to change this to no credit checks. Let's save this, and that's going to do it for our banner. Let's go ahead and start styling the banner, and we can move on to the features section once the banner is styled. To style the banners, you just want to jump into the banner.scss, and we can start styling in here. Before we start styling, let's take a look at what we have just to make sure everything looks right. Of course, it's going to be really ugly and janky, but the HTML is all rendered and it looks good. Similar to what we did to our header, we need to import the variables Sass file. So let's go ahead and jump into our banner and import that in here. We are going to get the banner class, and we're giving it a height of 80 viewport height, a position of relative, and we're giving this a media query only specific to the viewport width of 1440 pixels. So go ahead and write a max width. I can't spell. Max width, and we are using the widescreen variable. which it accesses the variable file and gets the widescreen variable, and that is equal to 1440 pixels. We're setting the height to a 90 viewport height. Now inside the banner, we need to get the banner edition BG. We are going to set the background color of blue. We're creating a position of absolute, setting the left to 0, right to 0, top to 0, and bottom to 0. The height of this is going to be 100%. And now outside of that, we are going to create another one. And this one's going to be for our banner BG. So .banner-bg. It's going to have a background color of pink. And actually it's going to be very similar to the edition BG. So let's go ahead and copy this and let's just change some things. So the background color is going to be pink. The position is absolute, left, right, 0, and all this right here is going to be 0. And the height is set to 100%. Let's open up the variables just so that we can make sure we got the right color. And I have a light pink that I want to use rather than just the pink. So let's change the BG to pink. Now outside of the banner BG, we are going to get the class name of banner-inner. And for the banner inner, we're setting the width to 100%. The height is going to be 80 viewport height. It's going to be a display of flex. Now the position is going to be relative, and we're going to use a media query. Let's go ahead and use @media with the max width set to a widescreen. And with the widescreen, we are going to set the height to 90 viewport height. Now inside the banner inner, we're having a content class, and the content class is going to have a width of 60%, a height set to 100%, a display of flex, and we're aligning the items to center. Now inside the content, we are having a content inner, and inside the content inner, we're going to go ahead and style our h1 tag. The h1 tag is going to have a font family of Playfair display. The color is going to be blue. For the font size, we're looking at a font size of 3.4 rem, followed by a line height of 4.8 rem. We are adding a margin. So the margin is going to be 32 pixels top. It's going to be 0 left and right and 0 bottom. And finally, the width of our h1 is going to be a width of 620 pixels. Now we are adding a media query. So I'm just going to copy the media because I hate writing it every single time. So it's going to be @media. We are going to change some things about our h1. The font size is going to go down to a font size of 3.1 rem. The line height's also changing. It's going to be a 3.6 rem. And then now we can exit out the media query. And then still being in the h1, we're going to get a line class. And so the line is going to have an overflow of hidden, a height of 76 pixels, and a position set to relative. Now inside the line is going to be a span tag, which is our content. That is going to have an absolute position. Let's save that. And then finally, we can exit out the h1 and start styling our p tag. The p tag is going to have a font size of 1 rem. And then the line height, let's go ahead and add a line height of 1.6 rem. Our font weight, we're setting the font weight to 300, which is going to be light. The color is going to be blue. Our width for our p tag, we're setting that to 520 pixels. And then we're giving it a margin of 32 pixels top, 0 left and right, and then 80 pixels bottom. And then we're adding a media query. So the media query for our p tag is just going to change the margin. And we're going to set the margin to 16 pixels top. Left and right is still going to be 0, and changing the bottom to 60 pixels. Now outside of our p tag, we can then access the button row class. And inside the button row class, we're going to give it a display of inline block. The height is going to be set to 56 pixels. We're going to have a line height of also 56 pixels. We're going to give it a font size of 1 rem. With a padding set to 0 and 32 pixels left and right. Text decoration, let's go ahead and set that to none. Our font weight, we're going to change the font weight to 600 so that it can be semi-bold. We're going to make the color set to white. And the background color, we're going to set the background to a red-orange. So if you use the $sign and access the red-orange variable. Finally, we're adding a border radius. And the border radius on this is going to be 100 pixels. Let's save that, and then finally we can do one more and then preview what we have. So I did make a mistake here in the button row. This is all going to be styles for our A tag. So go ahead and copy that and then nest it inside the A tag instead of the button row. Moving on, we can then add the play video, and we'll set the play video class to an absolute position. And we'll set the bottom to 0 and the left to 0. And then we'll create a border radius. So the border radius is going to have a top left and a top right of 4 pixels. So we'll set that top left, top right 4 pixels. And then the bottom right and the bottom left are going to be 0 pixels. And we're setting an overflow of hidden here. So for now, let's just take a look at what we have so far. The hand is completely out of place, but that's fine. Everything here looks good. We misspell, of course, because that is just typical in my videos. Let's see if we could fix this. Helping students pay their ridiculous debts. There we go. So that's fixed. The text is a bit longer than the mock that I had, and then the apply today button is working. We are now working on the watch video button, so let's continue on. Back to our banner.sass file. We're gonna add a span. The span tag is gonna have a display of flex. We're gonna align the items to center. The height is gonna be 64 pixels, and we're setting the padding to 0 and 32 pixels. Now the background color is going to be white, and our font weight, we're gonna set that to 600, followed by the color being our favorite color, which is blue. And then finally the image, which is going to represent our play button, that's going to have a margin right of 1 rem, which is going to be 16 pixels. If we preview what we have, this whole left side is beautiful and it looks great. This right side's a bit of a mess, and we're gonna work on that here in a second. Now back to the code. What we need to do is we need to find the content. And we need to make sure we nest our next image class inside content and outside of the content inner. So let's find content all the way to the bottom here. And then we'll do the styles for our image, which is the hand. So go ahead and get the image class name. And the image class name is going to have a position relative, followed by a width of 40%. The height is going to be 100%. And it's going to have a display of flex, followed by a justify content, set to center. And for our align items, we can just do flex end. Now inside of the image class, we're going to have an image inner class, and the image inner class is going to get anything but the image itself will. So the image is going to have a width of 450 pixels, a position of absolute, a bottom set to 0, a left set to 0, and a right set to 0. Now let's scroll down a bit so that we have more room to work with, and the z index, let's set that to 9. We can also add a media query. So when our project hits 1440 width, we can change the width of this to 400 pixels. Now outside of the image, but still being in the image inner, we are going to create a class name for feature banner. So go ahead and add the feature banner, and this is going to have an absolute position. It's going to have the bottom set to 286 pixels, and the left is set to -10 pixels. The background of this, we're changing it to a background color of light blue. So hit the $ with the L blue. This is camel case, so make sure you hit L and then capital B. And then the color of this is going to be white. So hit the $ with the white. And then the height of this is going to be 52 pixels with a display set to flex. We're going to align items to center so that we can align the text within the center of this div. And then give it a padding of 0 and 32 pixels with a border radius of 4 pixels. We're adding the font weight to the semi-bold, so go ahead and leave it at 600. Now nest it inside of the feature banner. What we could do is we could do an ampersand and a green. So for any class that has the feature banner and the green class, we want to change things in there. So add a background color, and we're switching this to the $ green color. We're going to give it a right of 32 pixels. A left of auto, and a bottom, we're switching this to 116 pixels. If we save this and preview what we have, we can see that the styles are there, but something is clearly broken. What I think it is when it came to nesting the HTML, I may have done something incorrectly. If we go back to our index.html, how our architecture or structure should be is it should go from banner inner, content, and the content of sibling should be image. I think I nested image within content. If we minimize content, we can see we don't have the image being its sibling, but it's its child. Let's go ahead and maximize content again and look for the div with the class name of image. Let's copy this, and outside of the content, we can find content class. We can minimize this, and we can paste it as a sibling. So it's going to go from content and image. Let's remaximize content and save this project. Jumping back into the banner Sass, we need to do this also here. So let's find the image and all of its styles. and then we can copy this and then look for content. We want to find the content class, and then we want to paste in our styles outside of this content nested class. Let's save this, and then if we preview our project, we can see it's all fixed. This sometimes does happen. Everyone makes mistakes. When it comes to nesting, be sure when you're writing a lot of code, just be sure to know where you place it. And if you do come up with an error or a bug, you can simply just look for it and fix it. When it comes to coding, you're going to make mistakes all the time. Just make sure you know how to fix them, and you could easily find the errors. Now that that's fixed, let's go ahead and code out the features section, and we can start animating. Let's jump back into our project, and we can close banner sass. Actually, before we close it, I think I want to add a media query to the green. When it comes to slowly minimizing or going to that 1440 pixels, we do face an issue of the green being covered by the hand. So add a media query and change the right to -24 pixels. Now go ahead and close out the banner sass, and let's open up the features sass, and let's also open up the index HTML, and let's write the HTML for the featured section. We're going to create a section, and we're going to give this an ID of features, as well as a class name for features. We're also going to give it a class name of container and a row. And inside of that row, we're going to give it a features-inner. Now inside of the features-inner, we're going to give it a features-content. So let's go ahead and write features-content. And in here, we're giving it an H3. And I'm going to fast forward this bit because it's just normal text. I just simply wrote, we are here to provide you with the best services. With the p tag, let's go ahead and drop in lorem ipsum and save this so that we can format it. And underneath the p tag, we are going to do a button row, and the button row is going to have an a tag. It's going to just go home, and the concept for the a tag is going to say view all services, and it has a sort of chevron arrow towards the end. Let's fix this, view all services. So we can add an image and then access the images folder. And from the images folder, we can find the arrow right SVG. The alt for this can just be arrow right or right arrow, whatever you want it to be. Now outside of the features content, we're going to add a features list. So go ahead and create a div for features -list. And here's where we're going to create a list of our services. So go ahead and create a UL with an LI. And inside of the list item, we're going to add an image. And for the first one, we're going to access the images, and we're going to display the fast delivery SVG. Alt tag can just say fast delivery. Now, still inside of the list item underneath the image, we're going to create an H5 tag, and we're just going to say fast delivery. Go ahead and give it a p tag, and we're just going to write some lorem ipsum text. Let's save this so that we can better see it. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy this list item, and we're just going to change the title for the H5, and we're going to change the SVG. So the second one is going to be 0 fees. So let's do 0-fees. And for the H5, let's switch this to a $sign with 0 fees. And let's create another one. And for the fast delivery SVG again, we'll just replace it with 0 interest SVG. And I don't really care about the alt tags. You could change it if you want, but it doesn't really matter here. And we'll just change this to 0% interest. Create another list item, and change the SVG to no credit checks, as well as the title, no credit checks. Paste in another list item, and the SVG is going to be called chat support, as well as the title or the H5, so go ahead and write chat support. Finally, our last one is just going to be called fixed payment option for the SVG and the H5. Let's save that, and that should do it for our HTML. We can then jump into our features as CSS and start styling. First things first, let's go ahead and import our variables. Once that's imported, we can then start styling. First thing we're doing is we're going to call the features class, and that's going to have a margin top of 20 viewport height. And inside the features, we have a .features_inner, and we're setting this to a display of flex with a justified content of space between. And we're going to align the items to a flex start. Now inside the features_inner, we have a features-content, and that's going to have a width of 33% with a media query set to a width of 40%. While still being in the features content, we can get an H3 and set the H3 to a font family of Playfair Display with the color being the blue variable color that we use, and the font size set to a font size of 2.6 rem. The line height is going to be 3.4 rem, and the margin is being set to a 0 top, 0 left and right, and a 40 pixel bottom. Now for our p tag, let's give it a line height of 1.8 rem. And if we don't specify a font size, it's just going to default to 1 rem or 16 pixels. So the font weight, let's go ahead and do 300. The color is going to be blue. And let's give it a margin bottom of 88 pixels. We can also give it a media query. And for the media query, we're setting the padding right to 60 pixels. If we save this and preview what we have, scrolling down, this left section is almost done, and then we're going to work on the right section. Once that's done, we can start animating. Jumping back into the project, outside of the p tag, we're going to access the button row class, and inside the button row, we have an a tag with the color being set to blue, a text decoration being set to none, and a font weight of 600. The image nested inside is our SVG. That is going to have a margin left of 16 pixels. Let's go ahead and save this. And then we can work on our right side. We can see that the left side and the a tag is completely done. Let's start focusing on this right side. Now just be sure you aren't nested inside the features content, you're just outside of it. Let's go ahead and do the features list. So we're gonna do a features dash list, and we're setting the width to this at 50%, and we're giving it a display of flex. We're gonna justify the content to center. And then the unordered list inside is going to have a display of flex, a justify content of space between, a flex dash wrap of wrap, and a padding of 0. Inside the unordered list, we have a list item, and the list item is just going to take a list style of none. And inside of that list item, we have an image, and the image is going to have a margin bottom of 24 pixels. Outside of the image, while still being inside the list item, we have an H5, and the H5 is going to have the color be blue. And let's scroll down a bit so that we could center this. And the font weight is going to be set to 600, while the font size is going to be 1.2 rem, and the margin is set to 0. Now we're going to start styling the p tag. The p tag is going to have a line height of 1.8 rem, a font weight of 300, and a color of blue. The width is going to be 270 pixels, while the margins are going to be a 16 pixel margin top, 0 left and right, and 72 pixels of bottom. We could add a font size if we want. If we do add a font size, it's going to be 1 rem, but that's kind of redundant, and I've done that previously since it is going to equal 16 pixels. All of our base font sizes for the p tags are going to be 16 pixels, but in our case, let's just leave it. It's not hurting anybody. Finally, we're going to add a media query, and for the media query, we're just changing the font size to 14 pixels. So it's going to be 0.875 rem. If we preview our project, we can see everything is done in terms of styles. The only thing missing is the animations, and the animations of course require you to use JavaScript. Within JavaScript, we are using GSAP for the animations and scroll magic to determine when an animation should run dependent on how far we've scrolled. To get that going, let's go ahead and jump into our JavaScript file and start coding out the animations. Back in our project, let's close out the index.html and the featured Sass, and let's open up our JS file, specifically index.js. To see if this works, let's go ahead and do an alert message. We can just say hello YouTube. And if we go back to our project, it's just running hello YouTube. Our JavaScript is working, which is great. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to get the header variable. And so to do that, we could do const header, and we can say document.querySelector. And with query selector, we'll just specify if it's an ID or a class name. So we know that it's an ID, and so we can just say header. We can then use GSAP to animate the header. To do that, we can say gsap.from, and this is different than .to. The difference here is that .to will animate the current look of it and then do something, versus .from is it'll animate beforehand. So it's going to animate to a final state, versus the .from, it's going to be an initial. So from is going to be where it's coming from, to is going to be to where it's going to. Now using the .from, what we need to do is specify a target first, so we'll say header, and then next we pass in certain variables for our configuration. So the first thing we're doing here is we're going to have the Y set to 16, the opacity set to 0, and the duration, we're going to give it a duration of 0.8, and this determines how long the animation should last. Then finally, we'll give it an ease, and so the ease is going to have a power3.in out. If we save this and preview our project, we can see that it's coming from an animation of how we specified it. So the Y16 brings it down, the opacity makes it hidden, and then when we run the animation, that is how our header looks like, and then the final is what it ends up in. Now showing you the difference of what .2 does, if I switch this to 2, this is going to result in it going somewhere. So you could see that the final state is already rendered, but it's going to, which means it's going down and then fading out. Well, you want a .from. So again, from just kind of describes the initial state of our element. Now that we've grasped the basics, I'm going to speed it up a bit. Let's go back into our JavaScript, and then we can capture the banners. So we can just copy this because I don't feel like writing query selector all the time. Let's copy this and paste it again. And the one underneath is going to be banner edition. And if we go into our index.html and scroll down to the banner section, we can go ahead and add the IDs for these. So go ahead and do ID. And they're both going to have banner and BG. However, the edition is going to have an addition, like so. Go ahead and save this. Then we can access both of these items. So we can say banner BG, and for the addition, we'll just bring in the addition. And again, these are coming from the index.html's IDs right here. If we split them between each other, we can see banner edition represents the addition BG, and banner BG just represents the banner BG. Let's get rid of this side by side, and let's bring back to the index.js. Now what I want to do is create a timeline within GSAP. So GSAP allows you to create a timeline, which will result. Now one thing I want to do is I want to create a timeline within GSAP. Now what a timeline allows us to do is create loads of animations that will run or execute right after another. And to do that, all we need to do is create a variable for the timeline. So we can call this banner.tl, and banner.tl will be equal to gsap.timeline. Now to start the timeline, we can simply write banner.tl.from, and this will initiate the first animation. Now the first animation we have was that sliding banner, so the blue and then the pink slide. To do that, what we can do is call both of our banners. So the first one we want to call is the banner additional, since it's the blue one, and then the next one is the banner itself. Now you notice I did add an array here. This allows us to call in multiple elements rather than just one. So make sure you add an array inside of the parentheses. Next, you want to add a comma and then pass in your configurations. The first one we're passing in is a duration, so we're going to do a duration of 0.2. Next, we're setting the width to 0. We are going to add a skew of x, setting that to 4. And I'm getting an error because I didn't put a comma here. So make sure at each property you add a comma. Next, we're adding an ease, and the ease is going to have a power3.inout. Now what we want to happen here is we want these to stagger. We want one to run after another. To do that, we can simply pass in a stagger and define the amount. So the amount, or the amount of time we want between each animation to run, is going to be 0.2 seconds. Let's save this and see what we have. If we refresh, we can see the banner working in the background and the header working as well. Now, the header isn't incorporated in the timeline, so it's just firing willy-nilly and by itself. To fix that, we can get rid of this GSAP, and we can get rid of this colon here. This will attach the .from to the banner timeline. If we save this, it's going to wait until this first animation is finished and then run the header. Let's preview our project, and the banner slide works and then the header fades in. However, sometimes we don't want it to look so structured. We want it to be very fluid and kind of come in at different times. In that case, we can then add a delay. Delays are typically supposed to use to push things back, but if we add a negative, it allows us to start animations a bit sooner. Adding a delay of 0.2 will give it a more fluid look. Next, we can work on this H1. Next, we can work on our content section. And to do that, we first need to bring in our H1. We can create a comment and say content. And we can do const H1 line. And it's going to be document.querySelector. However, since we have more than one H1 line we need to call in, we have the top one right here and the bottom one. We do need to use querySelector all. So go ahead and add querySelector all. And we're going to bring in the line class, and nested inside of that is the span tag. So go ahead and do that. Next, we can animate the h1 line, get rid of the semicolon, and add a dot from. We are passing in the h1 line target, and then pass in your configurations. In every configuration, you want to add the curly brackets. And as a configuration, we're adding a y of 80. The duration is going to be 0.8. The easing, we're setting the easing to be power3.out. It's a bit different than power3.inout, but it looks a lot better to add it on the h1 line. Next, we're adding a stagger, and the stagger is going to have an amount of 0.2. This will allow us to run one h1 line, the top one, and then right after run the second. Preview what we have, and we can see the animation looks great. However, it's really sort of that staggered to where it's one after another. Like I mentioned before, we can add a delay to give it a more fluid effect. So let's go ahead and add a delay of -0.4. This will allow it to come in a bit early rather than making it look all blocky or structured. Let's preview it, and we can see it actually looks really nice. Great. We can then move on. We need to bring in the p tag and the rest of the content. So let's do that. Underneath the h1 line, we can do the same. So we could do const content p, and we could do document.query selector, and then we can pull in the content inner specifically for the p tag. And let's actually go ahead and specify the other variable as well. So we have content button, and that one's going to be the content inner, and it's going to be .button-row. And then we have the play video. So go ahead and do const play video. And that's getting a play video class. Specifically, we want to target the span. We do need one more, and that is the play video cover. And what the cover allows us to do is sort of give it a reveal effect. So we did have play video, and we had the dot cover. If we go into our index.html and find the dot cover, we can see that we have play video here, and then we have play video cover. We never determined the styles for this, so I want to do that now. If we open up the banner styles here, we can find the play video, and from here we can write the styles for the cover. So it's going to be dot cover. And the dot cover is getting a padding of 0, a background color set to the light pink. The right is going to be 0. The z index, let's go ahead and give it a z index of 9, and a height of 64 pixels, followed by an opacity of 0. So you're not going to be able to see this just yet here. But in our animations, we're going to make a sort of pink box, and we're just going to move it out the way so that it can have a reveal effect rather than playing with the widths of the play video. Let's jump back in to our index.js, and from here we can finish the content animations. Scrolling down underneath the dot from h1, we can do another dot from, and let's give it, and we're going to pass in multiple elements. We're going to pass in the content p, and we're also going to pass in the content button. With passing in multiple elements, you need to make sure you add an array. Go ahead and add your configurations. So we're going to give it a y set to -40, a duration of 0.8, an opacity set to 0, an ease of power3.out, and let's scroll down a bit so that we can have more room to work with. Finally, we're going to give it a stagger, and the amount of the stagger, like all of them, are going to be 0.2. Let's save this in preview. And so you can see it slides in, the header comes in, the h1 comes in, and then the p and the button come in. However, it just takes a little too long. If we look again, the headline comes in, and then the p tag just kind of waits a bit. To fix that, we can add that delay that I mentioned before. And the delay of this one is going to be -0.6. Let's save this in preview. And so you see it comes in a lot smoother now. Next, we're going to work on our play video, and that should do it for the content. So with the play video, we're going to do a .to rather than a .from. We're going to pass in multiple elements, so it's going to be play video, and it's going to be play video cover. The configurations are going to have a delay of -0.6. We're going to set the opacity to 0. And the duration is also going to be 0. Once that's finished, we can add another .to. And for this .to, we're only going to work with the play video cover. The play video cover is going to have a delay of -0.6, a height set to 0, a duration of 1 and an ease of power 3 out. And if we jump into our banner Sass, one thing we should note is we want to change the opacity to the span set to 0. So initially we want it hidden, then we want to make it visible, and then we want to animate the cover out the way. So let's save this and let's make sure that we don't have any errors. We do have an error, and the error we have is the fact that the background color isn't background L, camel case, capital P. So let's make sure we fix that. Saving that in our Sass file, let's go back to our index.js, and one thing we did want to change was the opacity was set to 0. We need to switch back to 1. We're going to set the opacity to 1 here, and then it's going to animate. One thing I want to look at is looking at the HTML. I did access it incorrectly here. So it's not play video, but it's play dash video. So let's save this and preview our project. Okay, so everything seems to be animating in correctly. Next, we can exit out of this banner timeline and then just start writing gsap. So just write gsap.from. And in here is where we're going to pass in the image and the 2 feature banners. First, we need to specify them. So let's write a comment for image. And from here, we can just copy the query selectors. And the first variable is going to be hand image. And what we're accessing here is the image-inner, specifically the image itself. Let's copy and paste this 2 more times. And the second variable is going to be feature banner. And from here, we're going to access the ID. And the ID is going to be called feature banner. And we can do the same here. So it's going to be feature banner, specifically feature banner green. And the ID is going to be feature banner green. Let's save those and let's create the animations for our image. So the first one is the image. So we could do hand image and then write the configurations here. We are using .from. Let's add a delay of 2.2, an X of -100. Now add a skew X of 2, a duration of 0.8. Let's give it an opacity and set the opacity to 0. We want to give it an easing, and so the ease that we're going to give it is a power 3 out. Let's save this, and we can copy and paste this one more time. And this is going to be for our feature banners. So let's add an array, and let's pass in feature banner, and we're going to pass in feature banner green. And we're changing the delay to 2.4. The X is going to be an X of -60. Skew X is going to be raised up to 6. The duration is 0.8, opacity 0. Ease is 0.3 out like so. Last thing we're adding is a stagger, and we're giving it a stagger of an amount of 0.2. Let's save this and preview our project. Perfect. So our banner is completely finished. Now we want to create the animations for when we scroll down. And to do that, we're going to use scroll magic. First thing we need to do, however, is we need to scroll all the way back to the top. And let's bring in the DOM elements that we are going to animate. So let's add a features comment. And the first variable we're getting is the features content title. So it's going to be the h3. We can copy this and paste it one more time. And this one's going to be for the features content p. And this is going to be the features content p tag. Next, we can do the features content button, and this is going to be for the button row. So the features content dot button dash row. So h3p and button row, this is going to get this h3, this p, and this button row. Back in our project, final thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in the list. So this one's going to be called features list, and it's going to be features dash list, specifically the li for the list items. Let's save this and scroll all the way down here. And down here is where we're going to define a new timeline for our features timeline. So features timeline, we're going to do gsap.timeline. And then using features timeline, we can do a .from. And then we're going to pass in 3 elements. It's going to be the features content title, followed by the features content p. And then finally, it's going to be the features content button. All 3 elements are on the left side of the screen right here. Back in our project, we can add the comma and pass in the configurations. Opacity is going to be set to 0. Y is going to be set to 40. Duration is 0.6. The ease is going to be set to power 3.out. And then stagger, we're going to set the stagger to an amount of 0.2. Let's save this, and if we preview our project, let's refresh, we can see the animations coming in nicely here. Back in our project, we can add another .from, So let's attach one more. And for this dot from, we're gonna animate the features list. Let's pass in the configurations, and the configuration it's going to get is a delay of -0.4, an opacity of 0, a Y of 40, a duration set to 0.6, an ease of power 3 out, and finally we're gonna give it a stagger, and the amount for our stagger is going to be 0.4. Let's save this and preview. Okay, and you can see it works, but it's only animating one. And I think that's because for the document.query selector, I need to do query selector all so that I could access all list items. Let's see how it works. Perfect. So the animations are all working. However, we don't want the bottom one to run unless we've scrolled down to it. And here's where we use scroll magic. Firstly, I want to go into our, where is it at? Variable.scss, and I want to set a height of 2000 pixels just so it can give us some leeway to scroll. Now back in our index.js, let's scroll all the way down and then start using scroll magic. First, we want to create a variable for a controller. And this variable is going to take in a new scroll magic controller. So it's going to be new, and then scroll magic controller. And then we're going to establish a scene. So scene will be new scroll magic.scene. And in the scene, we're going to pass in some properties. So first, we're going to do a trigger element. And the element we want it to reach before it triggers is going to be that green features. So I guess when we scroll, when the top of our website, when it scrolls down to the green, we want this to start animating. So this is going to represent a trigger. So to do that, we can specify the ID. So it's going to be feature, banner, green. Now the trigger hook is going to be set to 0, and reverse is going to be set to false. This means that when we scroll back up, it's going to fade back out. We don't want that to happen. Next, we want to get the set tween, and we're going to pass in the features timeline, and then we're going to do a add to, and we're adding this to our controller. Let's save this and go back to our project. You can see everything is animating and fading in, and our features hasn't yet been animated in. But once we reach this no credit checks, it should start animating in. There we go. That's lovely. One thing we could do is we can add indicators here. To do so, all you need to do is run the add indicators function. And if we go back to our project, we can see we have trigger 1 and start 1. So once trigger 1 reaches start 1, that's when the animation should occur. We're scrolling, we're scrolling, we're scrolling, and then trigger hits start, and then this animation starts. That's going to be it for this video. If you did enjoy, please leave a like, make sure you subscribe. That's going to do it for me. Have a wonderful day.